Welcome to Greenway Audio Magazine. I'm B.E. Dunn. That is my bestest friend in the whole wide universe, Timothy Pickett.
Hey,
and we're
everybody.
here to talk to you about weed.
Yeah.
How you doing, man? What's
I'm
up?
doing great, man. I'm doing great.
Hang on.
Yeah.
Hang on. I said what's up, but what I meant was, oh, what's up?
Oh, wow. Old school
Yeah.
Budweiser. Jeez.
Yeah, I saw one of those commercials recently.
You did?
Yeah, I was watching a YouTube video of a TV show that came out in the 2000s.
Yeah.
Because it's not available anywhere else.
Yeah.
And so it had the commercials included.
Get out of here.
It was fucking awesome.
Dude, you know what? Sometimes YouTube will have like a video of like commercials from the 90s or whatever. Or I'll watch them. And I'm like, oh my God, I remember all of these.
I've got a fucking really cool, really fun idea before we get to our guest today.
Yeah.
Because we're on the subject of advertisements and nostalgia and stuff, because the other commercial that I saw on the same episode of the TV show was Budweiser
frogs.
Budweiser. So here's a fun little project. I think maybe it'll be fucking terrible. I don't know, Tim.
Mm-hmm.
I would like for you to give me like a 90s retro style curio ad.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, that would be fun.
Yeah.
I'll totally do that. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I absolutely will.
That's your homework for the week.
Yeah, deal.
You gotta come back next week with it.
Heck yeah. Hey, nice hat. Nice proper hat.
Hey, thanks, man.
Hey, speaking
I'm
of
a
proper,
big fan of. You got something?
I got a direct mail piece from Proper.
Dude. Ooh,
these are great. They got great.
Those are some good coupons.
They are great coupons. So I always like when I get those in the mail. I'm happy when I see them. Is what I'll say. It's good to know that they're out and about.
One of my favorite parts about Proper is that their hats, Proper and Timeless, are two people who understand hats.
Yeah.
No shade to any of the other companies. I'm not meaning it in a negative way. I'm just saying that like there's average, and then there's people who wear hats on a regular basis, and they understand what somebody who wears a hat every single day wants out of a baseball hat. And Timeless and Proper, they both do really well with that. So
I'm all about the less is more, the minimalist style. I love that.
My favorite part of this one is that it's all black on black, but it's still got the classic green underbill. It makes me feel like nostalgia, man.
Yeah, dude.
Nostalgia is such. I've talked to several people recently, and one of the things that keeps coming up is that, especially for people between like their early to mid 30s and people in their like early to mid 50s, there's like that 20-year bracket there where nostalgia is so big right now, and it kind of goes back to the pandemic. But there's a reason that like Pokemon cards are selling for thousands of dollars, and video game systems like Nintendo 64 and Super Nintendo are selling for thousands of dollars and stuff like that. And it's because we're in this era where people that are our age look around and they're like, holy shit, like I don't like a lot of what's happening right now.
Yeah.
And so you just kind of thirst for when everything felt good and made you feel welcome and happy, and you weren't thinking about all the like shitty things in the universe and all the responsibilities and stuff like that. And
then so many. I mean, when I see like new tours announced, I feel like I'm looking at a RFT from like 1995. It's like Limp Bizkit, Filter, Local H, like all these bands are coming back and selling out, and it's so cool. I love it.
I Googled something the other day, and one of the links that came up was Riverfront Times. and I was like, oh shit, click on that. Like it was related to Missouri cannabis. I think it was like a Tommy Chim's article that I was
Mhm.
trying to click on or something. And it's not there. And the Riverfront Times is just a bunch of like, make your dick bigger, like a bunch
Dude,
of like the
dang
clickbait
it.
article ads over and over and over. And I remembered, oh yeah, like they shuttered that like a year or
Mhm.
two ago, like basically overnight, and
Yeah. Yeah, it
everyone
was a big deal.
uh and it
They
just
didn't
bums me out
they didn't do
because
anything
again,
with it, I feel like.
nostalgia, you know,
Yeah, man.
that to me, whenever I was a kid in high school and I was
Thumbing through that.
sending in articles to alternative press and stuff like that,
Yes.
that was the dream job, was like covering
Absolutely.
music and stuff for Riverfront Times. And
Absolutely. Yeah, dude. Do you know what I got last year that I love? I'll pull up here as a prop.
what's that?
Um, bear with me. Worth the wait.
I really do want a 90s style curio ad from you next week.
Check this out.
What is that? Oh shit.
Mississippi Nights, the history of the music club in St. Louis. This is one of the coolest freaking books ever. I swear to God, I've been to like a third of these shows. I'm like, oh, I remember that. Oh, I remember that. Oh, I remember
There
that.
is a I don't do a lot on social media, but I happened to be on Facebook the other day and was scrolling through, and I think it may have been, you know how they'll like recommend groups or something because somebody
Mm,
liked something in that
yeah.
group or some shit.
Yeah.
I think it was maybe James Honey. Shout out Honey. Dogfight STL. Yeah. Um, did you know that? Did you know
Yeah.
that he's in Dogfight?
I didn't
Yeah.
know that. Okay.
Yeah. So I think it was James Honey that had liked something in this group, but it's a group that is just St. Louis punk, like nostalgia essentially. It's like pictures going all the way back to like the 70s and 80s
Oh,
of shows and flyers, and all the way up through, you know, some stuff in the early and mid 2000s and
mm-hmm.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I'm just sitting there going, oh my gosh, like this is the scrapbook that I don't have anymore.
Exactly.
Like,
That's what this
oh, it's
book
so
is, dude.
cool.
If you grew up around here, oof.
Did you get that back around Christmas time?
Yeah, I got it last
I
year.
think I saw that.
I got it last year for Christmas, or maybe 2 years
Yeah.
ago. Yeah.
I think now would be a really good time for us to pause, maybe do a bit of self-reflection.
Okay.
Maybe think about
Mm.
what we want out of 2026, and while we do that, um, let's let the people hear about our brand partners. You
Oh
know?
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Need a little spark to brighten up your day? I know I do. Well, meet the new Thrive all-in-one vape from Curio Wellness. It's a 1 gram all-in-one vape pen from their Best Self collection, which is coming out soon. Blending THC with carotene, limonene, and linalool for that perfect lemon lift. Imagine crisp citrus with a hint of pine. It's all in a portable, rechargeable pen that's ready when you are. So if you're looking for your daily spark, Thrive. It's got you covered. Basically, it's your new favorite sidekick, like Brandon for me. Check it out, everybody. Thrive, all-in-one vape from Curio Wellness.
One of the things that I found interesting recently is as I was doing some data mining, and by data mining I mean just looking at numbers, just regular numbers that are out there for everybody to look at. Just looking at literally the bare minimum shit that they do. I realized that last year we ran this big announcement from Mocan Trade about how we were over, you know, 20,000 jobs created and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah, I remember.
At one point we were up to like 21,000 active jobs in Missouri, or 21,000 plant touching
with agent IDs, I assume.
agents in Missouri because of agent IDs.
Yeah.
And that was a really big deal because one of the
Yeah.
big things that the industry touted for several years was job creation and how much growth was coming to Missouri's job market, and how much was being created by the marijuana industry. And all of that's been 100% accurate. Unfortunately, um, I was looking at it a couple days ago, and the number of agent IDs, so the number of people even capable of working in a plant touching business right now, is 13,100 as of the end of December.
Dang.
And so we've lost almost half. It's closer to like
Yeah.
80, or it's closer to like 40%. But you
Jeez.
know, we round up. We're down to 13,000, and we're obviously selling a ton of weed at retail.
Yeah.
The market itself is been very successful, but and again, this is just agent IDs. So this doesn't actually. There are people who have agent IDs who are not currently working for a licensed dispensary, cultivator, manufacturer,
Mm-hmm.
transporter, etc. Um, there are also people who work for those companies who maybe work in marketing or something like that,
Yeah.
where they don't have to touch plants, where
Sure.
maybe they don't have their agent ID. So there is a slight adjustment to both sides of the number of people actively working in the industry on
Yeah.
both the subtract a few and add a few.
Sure.
But I'm pretty sure it doesn't represent
No.
10,000.
No. No.
And so in that regard, I've been looking around and I've been trying to figure out what could explain such a significant drop. Obviously, everybody wanted to ramp up for adult use.
Mm-hmm.
Once you continue ramping up for adult use, you're going to get your systems in place, you're going to get the right people in place, you're going to have your SOPs refined and things like that. And so you don't need 7 people to accomplish the job that 4 people can do. We have 200 dispensaries in the state. We have 60 different manufacturing facilities or so in the state. We have 60 plus cultivation, whenever you include micro and stuff like that. I don't think that signifies, just the refinement process. I don't think represents that much. I think it's a combination of all those different factors, as well as market contraction. Because whenever you start taking away entire companies, and eliminating the redundancies of having 2 companies that both have a cultivation team, both have an accounting department, both have a marketing department. I think it's a combination of everything.
Yeah.
But I think it's an interesting reflection on where the Missouri market is currently, because we're obviously profitable. I say obviously. We're obviously making money.
Right.
That doesn't necessarily mean that every business is profitable.
Correct.
Some businesses have spent a lot of money to get to where they're at.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the bulk of Missouri businesses right now are operating in the black. I don't know that they're turning a huge profit, but I think most of them have passed the point of
probably just recently, though.
Yeah.
I mean,
I know whenever
it's been red for a while.
I know whenever we were going into adult use, shortly after the launch of adult use, we did one of our industry surveys. And at that time, out of I think we got 60 different companies to respond. At that time, about 1/3 of them were not only not profitable, but were not projecting to be profitable by the end of 2023.
Jeez.
And so, whenever you look at that, acquiring businesses makes a lot more sense if they're, they've already been operating and they're projecting out and stuff like that. So,
right.
That one I think is interesting.
Yeah,
I'm always
very
curious as to what's going on with the Missouri market and the numbers and the story behind the numbers and things like that.
We have our 3rd micro dispensary that just opened. Grassroots in Cape Girardeau.
I think we have almost 15 wholesalers
Yeah,
approved
wholesalers
now
is
as well.
good. Now they have
Now,
things to sell,
as
which is
as
good.
we've said as we've said previously, there's a difference between approved to operate and actually operating or operational.
Right.
I think we have 15 approved to operate. I think we still only have like 5 or 6 that are actually harvesting and producing product and stuff. But it's really, really man, I'm trying so hard not to say super exciting all the time anymore.
No, keep saying it.
But it's really invigorating to see the micro business market start to pop up and start to have products and start to have
Yep.
the ability to actually do what it's supposed to do, which is
Right.
provide an alternative experience and opportunity
Yeah.
to the operators in that space.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really hope that all of them wind up being the coolest fucking store in their
Yeah, me
city.
too. Yeah. Yeah. So we have 3 years later. Just
Two
3
of them are
doors open.
Southeast Missouri and
Yeah.
one in Kansas City right now. So
Yes. Kush 21 and Grassroots. It's Poplar Bluff and Cape.
Kush 21's kind of an interesting one because it's a micro business, but it's not a micro business.
Oh yeah.
They have operations in other states.
Oh really?
They're technically an MSO.
Oh no way.
Yeah.
All right. I drove by it when I was in I think it was Poplar Bluff, and I was like, that is a cool setup. Yeah, I liked it.
It is. It's in Poplar Bluff. They
Yep.
have 3 or 4 locations in, I think it's Illinois. No, Washington, Illinois, Poplar Bluff. So 4 in Washington, 1 in Illinois, 1 in Poplar.
Okay. Wonder who's behind that.
So,
Kush 21, yeah. I liked it. I think their marketing's pretty sweet and everything. Yeah, I hope that really kicks off.
Cool little logo.
Yeah. Everything green building. It was really neat. When I drove by it, I should have gone in, but good luck to them. That's awesome.
I'm super excited. I haven't had the opportunity. God dang it, I just said it again.
It's okay.
I'm just gonna get a t-shirt made that says super excited, like really big. That way I just have to embrace it.
Mm-hmm.
I really want to. I haven't had the opportunity yet to try some of the product that's being grown by these micro wholesalers.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the limited plant count, because the facilities are going to be set up differently.
Right.
I really think this is going to be a lot more akin to, what we're used to in getting, flour from your friend or your guy, your hookup,
Yeah. I would imagine the strain variety is going to be different than what you get in your normal dispensary, I would assume. I don't know.
Well, you definitely have the ability to grow things that you can't in a commercial cultivation facility.
Okay.
Because they're limited to 500 plants total.
Right.
450. I think it's 450. I think I've rounded up too many times in my head. But they have a limited plant count to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you're growing more than one cultivar or more than one, you're not going to have all of them be allotted to that 400 plants.
Right.
So whenever we've talked to guys like Jay Wills that have grown at home and made a pretty good reputation in doing so, home grows and micro grows are wildly different than commercial grows. You just have to have a different type of plant as far as what it can sustain, because it's being thrown through bucking machines, it's being thrown through tumblers, it's being harvested and chopped down and hung upside down to dry and stuff. but it's being moved in a big laundry basket, a
Yeah.
100-gallon laundry basket from room to room and stuff. Whereas if you're only harvesting 20 to 50 plants at one time instead of 1,000 plants at one time, you can do it a whole lot differently. You can hand trim everything, and there are
Right.
companies that
Yeah.
still hand trim,
Yeah,
but
sure.
there's a big difference between hand trimming and hand doing everything, hand watering and hand
Yeah.
fucking bonsaiing that shit while it's
Yeah.
still actively growing and stuff like that. And so I'm really excited to see, especially the flower, how much variety they get. And you talk about a pheno hunt. Imagine doing a pheno hunt on something that you're growing in a micro, where you have the ability to let it get as wild and crazy and out there. You can let it foxtail, you can let it do some of the stuff that you don't want it to do in a commercial grow, because it's going to fuck up the production flow. You can allow it to go crazy, and you can allow it to have time to kind of reverse its course and change its nature a little bit more and stuff.
That's cool.
So I love anything that brings competition.
Yeah, me too.
I think that, especially in a market like Missouri, and as we move towards federal legalization, hopefully, we're talking about rescheduling and stuff a lot lately, but as we move towards the potential of legalization long term, I like the idea of having both the Coca-Cola and the McDonald's and the Walmart and the Target, and also having the mom and pop shop and your local dive bar and your local I'm trying to think if there's even a place, Barnes and Noble maybe, where you can buy comic books that's like a national chain nowadays.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Okay.
But that's way different than going into a
Mom and
local
pop.
comic book shop,
Yeah, dude.
and talking to the dude behind the counter that's
Yeah.
been reading.
Yeah.
He's going to argue with you about who your favorite superhero is.
Right.
And like that's what I love about. You got it a lot more in the early days of medical. You had guys that
Yeah.
they would argue with you about
They're
what
very
you
opinionated.
liked.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
in weed, it was like going to a record store and being told, like,
That's what I was gonna say. Yep.
You pick up the Britney Spears
like,
CD, and they're like,
come on, man.
No, come on. Yeah. Come on, put down the cock rock, man.
Yeah.
I kind of love the vibe of like the elitist, like, asshole that knows better than you do.
Yeah, dude.
Especially if it's their whole living. Like,
right. That's why I feel like dispensaries need to use the old retail music store model, which is the employees' picks. I feel like there should be a wall of like, this is what Tommy likes, this is what Susie likes, you like these names. This is what Julie likes. And that's their product. That's their pick of the month. And then they get to talk to people
This is what Rico Suave likes.
Yeah, Rico Suave too.
Rico Suave.
Dude, I just feel like that is missing. I feel like that personal human that touch. What's that?
Nostalgia.
We're all about it.
You used to go into Blockbuster, staff picks for Blockbuster.
Yeah.
Sam Goody or your
dude, always
staff picks at
I'd
Sam
go right
Goody.
there. And be like,
especially if you ever found the one person, like, you may have never met them, but you saw their little name placard, and every time you walked in, they had a new fucking banger.
Yeah, and you're like, ooh, okay.
You're like, okay, so every time I go in, I trust what their recommendation is. Never met this person before, never talked to them, never seen them eye to eye or anything like that. They could be a figment of the store manager's imagination and what he wishes he liked.
Right.
But man, it was spot on. I love that.
I went to Iowa last weekend to visit Iowa State with my son. And so
shout out Cyclones.
Yeah, dude, he accepted. He's an official Cyclone.
Hey,
yeah,
blowing them down.
But I got to tell you, so I have been the furthest you can go north, and now the furthest you can go south in Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
My God, this is a big state. It's got to be 8
state.
hours from tip to tip. Yeah, but it was crazy. I passed one or two. I think I passed a Codes in Hannibal. But I was just farm town the whole way out there. But man, this is a massive state. So yeah, the fact that we have 200 dispensaries and 3 micros makes sense. Hey, do you know what I tried the other day? Finally, I can't believe it took me this long. Dialed in gummies.
Oh,
Mm.
so you did try getting dialed in.
I tried to get dialed in. I was talking to Max Van Sluis.
What was the flavor one that you got?
I got the indica. I think it's like a blueberry or something like that. I like the taste of weedy stuff. So the fact that they're all live rosin.
That's so funny to me. That's so funny to me.
I loved it. So good, dude.
For somebody that doesn't love smoking and stuff, how much you like the flavor of live rosin gummies and drinks and stuff.
I only go live rosin or solventless or something because I just love that taste. So
I'm the opposite.
They're so good, dude. So good. And I was put right into deep sleep according to my sleep app. Right after taking it. Yeah. So
what kind of sleep app do you have? Do you have the little bracelet or the little ring? Or
I got the Apple Watch, but I use this app called Bevel, and it's really nice. I track everything. Big data nerd over here. Yeah, but dialed in, man. I think I'm hooked.
Ironically, one of the things I tried recently was some Curio flower from Missouri Health and Wellness.
Yeah.
I name drop them a lot, but that's just because they're right by my house.
That's your go-to, yeah.
I wish they carried more shit that I liked.
Yeah.
There's a lot of brands that they don't carry that I really, really like, including Dialed In.
They don't. Dang.
And they don't carry them.
Bummer.
Yeah, like that's the gist of it. But the Curio flower I shared with a friend of mine that smokes quite a bit, and they were very impressed.
Cool.
And that's like the 5th person in a row that's been like, oh yeah, Curio, like the flower is really, really good. Really impressed by this.
I hear a lot.
And right now, it's one of the cheapest ones available by me. I
Sweet.
Go and I get it for $20 for an eighth.
Woo.
If I'm gonna buy flower,
yeah, dude,
I don't have to buy a whole lot. I usually get some samples and stuff. But,
good.
The guy at Curio doesn't give me any samples. So,
you know, my favorite vape card is.
What is your favorite vape card?
It's the GI Soothe. It's a Curio vape cart, and I've seen them. And then I was in a Suede in Eureka. I was talking to my favorite bud tender down there, Josh Anthony, and he was like, "Dude, your GI Soothe carts are the best." And I was like, "What? Really?" He's like, "Oh my God, they're so good with the CBG." And I was like, "Okay." So I got one and tried it. Hooked, dude. Oh man.
Hey guys, do I have news for you? Quick heads up, Kind Goods just opened their 6th location in Maryland Heights, right off 270 on Dorset, and the place is a vibe. They're Missouri's OG deli-style dispensary, so you can actually walk in, see the flower, look at it, maybe get a sniff, talk to the people who really know their stuff, and shop without any pressure. Take your time, figure out what you want. The store's super welcoming, the staff's amazing, the selection is huge, and it just makes the whole experience easy. You know I love it easy. So if you're in the area, you're heading toward a show, swing by the new Kind Goods on Dorset. Let them know that we sent you. Tell them Greenway Audio Magazine. Good vibes, great products. You'll get it as soon as you walk in.
Today we're speaking to James Stevens, CEO of Sinful Brands, a Montana-born cannabis edibles company best known for its high-dose, flavor-forward THC beverages and gummies. Sinful launched in Montana's adult use market in 2022 and has since expanded into New Mexico, distributing through more than 350 dispensaries. James, I wanted to say thank you so much for joining us today, and I appreciate you taking the time. And let's just kind of dive in and start at the beginning. You don't come from a cannabis background.
Yeah, so thank you, Brandon, number one, for having me on the show. And yeah, I don't come from a cannabis background. I come from a technical background. So my background's really microbiology and chemical engineering, and so I started in kind of the pharma, material design space all the way back in 2002. The thing that doesn't talk about a lot is because I was the tech guy and I knew lots of people in the industry. Everyone always asked me all the way back in 0203, how do you extract? How do I do this? What's this solvent do? There was discussions about things like THC acetate and using butane well before any of the actual markets became legal around. So I always knew the guys. That was always one of the guys that people knew they could call me for technical advice on like chemistry or biology with stuff. And I wasn't going to judge them. I'm like, I don't care what you do. And so like there was always those open discussions. On the West Coast, it was like everything was White Widow all through the 2000s. And so it was always like, how do we best extract White Widow and whatever? And I'm like, to me, I was like, it all tastes the same. So you can use any of these technologies, but for me, I'm like, that's the only thing they had, in Seattle circa 02 to 2010, it felt like.
So were you a cannabis guy even before you were a cannabis guy?
Always kind of adjacent, right? So I was always interested, and it really comes out. So my dad was a Vietnam veteran. He worked for the Department of Veterans Affairs. I went to high school in Wyoming, and I was around a lot of veterans with severe extreme PTSD, doing events with like ex-Rangers and all these kind of things and learning from them. And what I noticed is the guys who illegally consumed cannabis in Wyoming had way better PTSD outcomes than the guys on pharmaceutical interventions. And it led me to being interested even early on, even before college, in, I guess naturopathic medicine, plant medicine. They didn't really have a term for it. It was just like, oh, compounds from plants back then. But it really got me into being like, okay, there are alternative options and there probably are these more holistic solutions. And so it kind of always kept me tangentially interested in the space, even from high school.
That's awesome. The way I wasn't a big stoner kid and stuff like that in high school or anything like that. The way I found my way to the cannabis industry was learning about Charlotte Figi and seizures and encephalopathy and things like that. And I was an advocate before I was really a consumer. And so it's always interesting to see where different people come from. Some people they're like, I stumbled into it because I was smoking since I was, 13, 14 years old. And it just so happened that at one point there became a legal market and aligned with my skill set. You have probably one of the most sought after skill sets in cannabis at this point, as we're moving forward with the industry, because I think everybody kind of understands plant sales and marketing and things like that. I think a lot of people consider themselves very good growers, even home growers. There's a difference of scale. But there's not a whole lot of people that can extract on a really high level and formulate and make things that are unique. That's the biggest difference, right? Is unique, because there's a million gummies, there's a couple hundred beverages and edible products, but not all of them have some unique flair, some unique qualities to them, right?
Yeah, and building that skill set was an interesting path just in general. So I started getting into like, sustainability and, startup scene and tech development because I wanted to like suck algae out of the ocean and make jet fuel for the military, right? Just totally crazy batshit stuff that we used to do for all these major companies. And what really kind of got me in this whole thing is I started this transition of, oh, we're going to make jet fuel. And then, I met, Frank Mars III, who owned the Delicious Candy Company, at a conference. He said, hey, that jet fuel you're making, it's also the flavor of orange we use in candies. Talk to our flavoring house. That led me developing materials for flavoring houses, which then led me to working with CPG companies and cosmetic companies, which then taught me consumer design and consumer demand. And then really, after I sold my previous company that was doing ingredient innovation, and we know 2020 happened, we're all sitting around being like, what we do? I'm like, look, we've learned enough about market stuff, and the current drink in Montana's market is absolutely terrible. We can absolutely dominate this space. And then so under medical with our licensed partner then, which it was vertically integrated and you couldn't trade, so we just had to pick the biggest company in Montana at the time to make it worthwhile. We're like, we can make a better drink than these guys. So we had, not only did we have the technical expertise to, do the formulation, make our own emulsions, work with the flavoring companies, actually make it what someone's going to want it. We also had started learning consumer demand from companies like Lush Cosmetics, Estee Lauder, Kraft Heinz, Mondelez, because of that CPG experience. And what we learned is people wanted to be the same, right? If you're in Shanghai or Montana or New York or, St. Paul, you want your Starbucks to taste the same. Anheuser-Busch, working with them, it taught us you want that beer to taste the same no matter where it's rooted in the world. And because people want consistency and reliability once they like a product. You do not want it to change once you like it. And so understanding that, you start learning that it's not just about novelty, it's about what fits into people's use behavior, what the actual consumer wants, and then how do you make that taste the same in Montana, in New Mexico, in New Jersey, whatever. And with cannabis, it's this fun, unique challenge because every state has different rules. And you can't transport. So you're building new manufacturing. You're doing different types of partnerships. Lots of the partnerships don't work out. It's cannabis, right? And so, you start learning all these different things. But New Mexico's water tastes radically different and has different issues than Montana. And so you're like, how do I make a 100 milligram, 1.6 ounce or 2 ounce shot taste identical in Montana and in New Mexico? That's a huge technical challenge. But if you can solve those technical challenges, people will love the flavor, and then the other side effects, the THC content, the CBN, whatever else you put in there, just become an add-on to that whole thing.
You caught me, like you threw out the hook and you caught me, and then we blazed right past it. You were making jet fuel that was the same formulation as candy?
Yeah, so we were making jet fuel for a DARPA project from algae we were sucking out of the ocean with fake whales. And then we'd ferment it, and it would make a compound that literally is orange flavor. It also performs identically as jet fuel. So it was natural, all fermentation derived. We could we could replace JP8, and we were working on JP5 stuff, that was the height, that was 08, everyone was worried about peak oil, sustainability was a big thing. And then we were at this conference, trying to find investors. And this guy's like, hey, we use that exact molecule with our flavoring houses to make orange flavor.
That's so crazy.
And then we learned our technology while we were trying to do energy could make all these other things. And then so we just pivoted hard and we're like, no, we're going to do ingredients. We're going to do contract R&D for all these major firms, and went that way.
That's so amazing. Yeah, I know we're here to talk about weed, but I'm a nerd, so anything that catches my attention, I'm here for it.
What's really cool, it's all the same though, right? So like the same compound can be jet fuel. I can extract THC from a plant with it, right? And then it's all natural. So I can make it all natural, certified organic, and do a certified organic extraction with all this stuff. And that's what I did, is built these ridiculously complex systems for stuff, which let me just naturally fit into cannabis regulation, cannabis production, all that kind of stuff. I'm not a grower. That's the part that I'm like, man, just give me distillate and I'm good, is usually where I'm at. It's a little more complicated than that, but usually the whole grow side, there's too much phenotypic drift. There's all that stuff we can talk about that just drives me nuts. I'm trying to make a stable product. Like a stable live rosin product is really hard to make. And so when we're looking at that, it's like I get more towards the formulation side because I can control it. And that's what I get excited about. All this complexity can still be controlled and make a product that tastes the same all the time that people love.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that you're really good at baking.
Not so good at baking, but I am really good at making, like beverages, like whether it's distilled spirits, whether it's a soft drink, whether it's a whatever. I naturally got into it, and I just love fermentation, right? So like the stuff I would love to work on in the future is like, can I ferment cannabis and do the conversions with brewer's yeast or champagne yeast or whatever, and make the THC bioavailable and decarboxylate it and do it all like in a big brewery? That's the future I'm so excited about. Like if it becomes federally legal, descheduled, whatever, then I can go like put champagne yeast with harvested cannabis and get some crazy thing and get it decarboxylated, and we make cannabis champagne in Missouri or whatever, right? That would just be like my dream to do stuff, just because I know people would be like, what is this? And you can make it taste good still.
I'll be signed up for the first bottle. I always think of people who are very science and structure forward as bakers. I'm a guy that was in a past life was a sous chef in a kitchen whenever I was in college and stuff like that, and I can cook, because a lot of it comes down to add a little bit of this and a little bit of that, because it's always to taste, because everything changes. To your point, the water in Arizona or New Mexico is different than the water in Montana. If the kitchen's 115 degrees during the summer, you don't have to cook the steak as long as you do whenever it's negative 14 in the winter and stuff like that. And so I'm really bad at baking because I can't follow the script, essentially. And that's what I think is so unique about what you said with the variables, because we've experienced that in Missouri. One of our largest producers is a company called Clover that has a bunch of partnerships with very well-known brands from across the country and stuff like that. One of the things they talked about whenever we talked to Josh Mitchum was one of the first batches of robots that they did in the state. Whenever it was packaged and set for a while and then exposed to Missouri humidity, the sugar crystals did something strange and wound up sticking to the sides of the packaging, and it had this brown slime all down the insides of the packaging. And they were the first company in the state to do a voluntary recall, and trying to explain that to regulators, that you're voluntarily recalling a product just because it doesn't look appealing, was a big challenge in Missouri at the time. And so I love hearing how you both what the different problems are that people run into in manufacturing from state to state, but also how you go in and how you fix little things like that, because I could never.
Yeah, and one of the things I've always learned is you got to design systems with tolerance, so it can it's going to taste the same even if all these variables, pH, heavy metals in the water, right? Like if all these different things, in wine they call it terroir, right? The soil constituents creating flavor profiles, and if people are using living soil, it's radically different than hydroponic, ebb and flow systems, which are radically different than that. You get all these different trace materials, and then so designing these systems around all this variance, a lot of people are like, oh, that's so crazy. Dude, pharmaceuticals have been doing this forever, right? Chemotherapy drugs taste terrible, right? Vitamins taste bad. The food industry has been solving these problems for that. And that's where there's a lot of recreating the wheel that occurs when actually the food industry has a bunch of the toolboxes, right? The fragrance industry has a bunch of the toolbox already set aside. They just classically wouldn't look at cannabis because it was illegal, right? And so you have this thing where until it got to a certain level, actually accessing that knowledge base, it wasn't gate kept on purpose. Tons of these companies would love to work and partner with, these companies making this stuff. It's just they didn't know how to legally do it, or they weren't, there wasn't enough risk tolerance. Some of these billion-dollar flavoring companies are like, yeah, you even look at cannabis? Don't talk to us. Just from a podcast like this, I know at least two companies that would be even at a food trade show would see me now if they knew about it. It would be like, yeah, we can't sell to you now.
That's wild.
So then you have this weird thing, right? There's still a stigma even on the industrial side because of either real or perceived risk.
Well, and it's, even as we look at rescheduling and how that's going to change a lot of things for the next year, there's also ebbs and flows. There's positives and negatives with everything in cannabis, right?
Yep.
Because every step forward comes with its own set of new challenges and things like that. Rescheduling is great, largely, but it could present some pretty significant problems, or at least obstacles for operators once we get to FDA regulation and things like that. If the companies aren't set up properly, or if they're not prepared for it properly, depending on how far we get into that FDA regulation. You probably have a little bit more familiarity with that because you come from a background in food safety and biotech, and some of the things you've already discussed. But my understanding is you've worked with products that have been FDA regulated before.
I have, both on the food side and on the pharmaceutical side. And so, the first thing I always think is I think a lot of people are way more like, pharma is going to take over with Schedule 3, all that kind of stuff. Look, drug development to get an approved drug, except for Epidiolex and Dronabinol, right? There's only 2 approved drugs. Unless someone's secretly working on a plant-derived approved drug in the background that no one knows about, it's going to be like 10 years till there's an approved drug on the market. So even if it stays Schedule 3 or whatever, there's not really going to be this interest. If it was already Schedule 1 and they were leaving everyone alone, descheduling it down just deprioritizes it. So I think the threat to state programs is much less than people think. I think it probably increases the threat to, hemp and industries like that, where it's like, okay, now there might be a little more motivation to actually enforce the rules as there are. But the state programs were already technically federally illegal, right? Even though the states allow it. From there, you're already quote unquote adulterating products, right? THC isn't allowed. So like a lot of those don't really change. I think the Schedule 3 thing is just part of the fight, right? I think it really does need to be descheduled and moved into something like TTB, where it's treated like alcohol and tobacco. I think if it goes that way, that's probably where it sits. It doesn't stop it from being turned into commercial drugs or derivatives of these cannabinoids being converted into novel new pharmaceuticals. Like, it doesn't stop any of that, but I also don't think it's the sky is falling. I think the main thing is it might let people not have to deal with 280E, maybe. Right? There's those Republicans who want to make 280E stay on cannabis even with rescheduling. There's a bill that states that they keep trying to get passed, right? So it might not even get rid of 280E for people. And so I think there's a lot of, this is exciting. It's going to be exciting for public markets and MSOs because it's not it's buy and sell the news, not actual reality. I think reality in the background is the vast majority of people won't really see an impact other than maybe new money floods in. So it's exciting, and that always causes problems.
It opens the doors a little bit more to research in a lot of places too, right?
Yeah, it does open up. But I still think even with that, you can't just go buy weed from your local dispensary and run a university research program. I still think it's going to have to come from an approved supplier of either synthetic cannabinoids or those 3 locations. I think there's one in Mississippi and like 2 others that are allowed to grow cannabis for federal research. I think it's still going to probably have to come from those guys, from what I understand. So,
one of the things that Sinful as so. Hang on, I'm a marketing guy. I'm a big brand geek. Where did the name Sinful come from, and why?
So I'll give you the real story. So for maybe almost 20 years now, we've always coded all of our projects that we work on off the 7 deadly sins, right? So if we're working on something in the defense industry, that's wrath. If we're working on something with clothing or jewelry or fragrance, we might codename that envy. If it's a personnel kind of thing and we're working with people to get them placed in positions or whatever, might be lust. And so the running joke is, you can't call cannabis sloth. No one wants to buy a bottle that says sloth on it, right? And so we're just like, okay, we'll just use the name Sinful because we've been code naming all these different projects after the 7 deadly sins for years and years and years.
That's amazing. That's one of the best brand stories I've ever heard.
And it creates an immediate story and connection, right? And really, the whole Sinful thing was kind of this homage to, we were always doing stuff on the edge, right? We were always talking technology that everyone's like, what do you mean you're sucking algae out of the ocean? What do you mean you're rotting cookies that fell on the floor and turning them into orange color? Like, I don't get this. This is all crazy out there stuff. And so we were always on the fringe, and we're like, look, cannabis is less harmful than alcohol. Almost all the data says that, right? I'm like, why is cannabis considered more sinful than like drinking a fifth of vodka every day? And so with that, we're like, you know what? Let's just try to re-own the name and like let's just be in it. And we have people that super religious people just fucking hate it, right? It's funny. Other people are like, hell yeah, this is my brand. And so, I kind of was like, you can't please everybody all the time. So I'm just like, Liquid Death teaches that. The current administration teaches that. Lush Cosmetics, all these different things I've interacted with. They teach us that you can't please everyone all the time, and if you do, you're just a blah brand.
I love that, and I love anything that embraces being tongue in cheek about social stigma, because that comedy and lightheartedness and stuff like that are a lot of times the things that start to push the needle a little bit farther. And so I think taking ownership of something like this is frowned upon, and kind of as Spinal Tap said, this one goes to 11.
Yep.
Kind of just amplifying it. We have a brand in Missouri that started in Missouri. It's now in a couple other states, including New Jersey, called Illicit.
Oh, yep, I've seen that
illicit cannabis. Like, it got to a point where we had to say traditional market and gray market or black market or things like that, because otherwise we were constantly promoting a specific brand that we weren't actually talking about whenever we were saying, this is what's happening with illicit cannabis in Missouri or somewhere else in the country.
My other favorite one is corporate mids, because I'm like, some people have done the corporate mids thing around. I know there's someone in Montana just launched with that brand again too. So
I love that.
I was just laughing because I'm like, it's the one I always use if I'm talking about boof weed. When people ask, I'm like, yeah, corporate mids.
While we're talking about the culture of the company, and the namesake of the company, one of the things that you've said recently in a release was that your guiding question became, would someone actually want to drink this again? And why is that question harder for cannabis companies to answer than it sounds?
So at the end of the day, there's this belief among OGs and connoisseurs that people want things to taste like cannabis. We've actually found the exact opposite. 70, 80, maybe even 90% of consumers, if everything they're doing cannot taste like cannabis, that's what they want. They want a watermelon ice flavored vape. They want a gummy that does it. And if you look at the brands that are really killing it, you look at Smokies, you look at Wild, you look at a lot of the stuff that's out there on that side. Their top selling SKUs, they don't taste anything like cannabis. A lot of the top vape ones now, it's Orange Tsunami, which is still terpene flavors, but guess what? It tastes like an orange creamsicle, right? It does not taste like cannabis at all. And there's this connoisseur belief, and they're a vocal minority, right? So if you listen to the connoisseurs and you listen to what they say, that's what's on social media, that's on X or Twitter, that's on whatever. It's got to be this. It has to be the dankest stuff. It has to be this. But then when you look at sales of the actual sales data, it's fruit forward strains, blueberry muffin, orange Cushman, stuff like that. It's not the only reason people are okay with stuff that's all GMO crossed is it gave the high THC potency. And so when we actually look at consumer behavior, they'll say one thing, or the vocal minority says this, and then the buying behavior is absolutely different than what they think. Right? We have shops where people will shop our product by potency, and they will avoid their favorite flavor for a flavor they don't like because it's 101 milligrams based on testing and the variants, and the other one's 99. There is no human on earth that can tell a difference between 101 milligram drink and a 99 milligram drink. There's no one. There's no one, especially if you're consuming all 100 milligrams, that 2 milligram difference is not going to be anything you can handle. Like, you're not going to tell it. There's no like sommelier of cannabis drinks that's like, I tasted this one. This one's 99 and this one's 101. It's not going to happen. And so like, there's this thing, but like people want a consistent experience and they want cost effectiveness. And that is just, and I learned that from the food industry, right? At one point I was in a meeting with a big food company and they're like, hey, do you know that 70% of Americans buy food at least once a month from the Dollar Tree stores? And I was like, there's no way this is true. And then we looked up stuff and we're like, oh my God, it's true. There are people that will buy at least one because it's cost effective, right? That $1 3-ounce steak, you're like, who buys that? A lot of people do. And so this is this difference between brand owners, you know, old school OGs who love their strains and like market perception. And there's a gap there that exists. And man, I have made people super pissed off pointing out that gap in their own POS data.
Oh, I 100% believe it, because
Like with great
I'm
bad.
I'm one of those people that, if you can make my weed taste like it's got a little umbrella in it, and it needs to be served, in a fish bowl or something like that, I'd much rather have that.
We have a blue raspberry drink for you that you could just pour into a fishbowl, and it would look like a fishbowl drink, and it would just taste like the fruitiest drink you ever drank.
I love that, because I haven't drank alcohol in like 10 years. But I'm the same way. Like I look at it, and the big thing for me, whenever we started talking about it in a couple years ago, as far as marketing and consumer outreach and stuff like that, the thing that I've always tried to preach to clients and partners and peers is, you already have everybody that's already smoking cannabis. They've already made a decision whether they're going to go to the dispensary and pick up a product that you sell, or whether they're going to continue to buy from the guy next door down the street, or their Uncle Ricky Bobby or whatever.
Yep.
What you don't have is all the people that aren't currently consuming. Now, whether they've ever consumed before or whether they've never consumed before, that's the real target demographic for most cannabis companies, is everybody else who's not currently consuming, because that's the vast majority of people. Overnight, cannabis legalization, especially recreational legalization, literally goes overnight. In Missouri, it went from 225,000 people that could legally purchase cannabis to 5 million, like that could. Now, that doesn't mean all 5 million of them will, but the potential is there. And if they weren't already consuming cannabis, it wasn't just because it was illegal, because they were definitely speeding sometimes, they were definitely cheating on their taxes sometimes and things like that. It was because they didn't like the smell of weed, or they didn't like this, or they didn't like that. So if you give them something that they're already used to, a beverage, a candy, a product that, there's not a whole lot of tobacco flavored nicotine vapes out right now, but
No.
there's a whole lot of fruit flavored and pink unicorn fluffy poofy cloud and stuff like that. And that goes to exactly what you're saying, that people don't want the thing that they can replicate from smoking a lot of times.
Well, and one of my favorite just weird facts about cannabis, that when you look at the data and reporting and self-reporting of cannabis use, is it appears about 20% of the population, no matter where they're at, will routinely consume cannabis, given the option. But those numbers, maybe they don't because they're afraid of it, but those numbers even hold true in places where they'll cut your head off for having cannabis, right? It's about 20% of the population wants cannabis for whatever the reason. It's not everybody. And, a lot of people in the industry thinks everybody's going to go towards it. There's a lot of reasons. I don't like memory effects, right? So for me, like nothing high dose over a couple milligrams is going to be even remotely interesting to me at all, because I don't want any memory holes, right? Which is funny because the products we make are absolutely not for me. And that goes into like building for consumer behavior. Like, I'm like, this is not for me. I'd have to dilute it in 5 gallons, and then it's going to take me 2 years to drink that whole thing. And that's what I just find so fascinating about the whole thing, is there's all this data we actually have because of drug studies, because of use studies, because of trying to do drug prevention all there, that actually is useful for brands and consumers to understand the whole space as well.
So while we're talking about dosage and to your point right there, a 16-ounce 100 milligram format is your standard.
Yep.
Why?
So we started out thinking people were going to make mocktails and pinky up, and they're going to do little drinks and do all this stuff. Our first sales, those guys were grabbing a bottle and slamming half or the whole bottle out to their car before they even left the dispensary. Really. As soon as they stepped out of the door and can open their package, they were drinking half to 3/4 to a full bottle. And we realized we had misjudged who does it. And then just like concentrates and whatever, it's actually the volume users that allow dispensaries to stay open. Grandma buying a bottle and mixing 2 milligrams at a time and having one bottle last her a whole month is not going to keep a business open. Right? People, same thing with gummies, right? You know, the grandma who's cutting her gummies into fourths to sleep at night is not driving your business. It's the guy who's like, I love candy. I'm eating 80 milligrams of these smokies, right? That's the thing. Same thing with us, right? So that's actually why our next product category was a 1.6 ounce shooter bottle, right? Still 10, 20 servings in there officially, but that's a 1 ounce shot with 100 milligrams in it. You know, that's 40% of our sales probably.
Wow.
Right. And we know people that drink 4 or 5 of those. I don't know how they afford it. God bless them. I'm so glad they do. But, you know, it lets us do our cool stuff. But like for me, like the thought of consuming that many milligrams is just on a routine basis. I can't even like comprehend it. But we also do know that THC tolerance builds quickly. And this has always been my argument against a lot of the low dose products. People being like, oh, people want 2 milligrams. I'm like, yeah, for the first 5 times, but if they replace alcohol with a 2 milligram seltzer, there's pretty soon to get the same feeling and effect, it's going to take 5, and then it's going to take 10, and then it's going to take 20 milligrams. You know, they're not going to buy 42 milligram seltzers to get to their dose.
I've always been of the opposite. You explaining that to me, like, flips a switch in my head, because I've always been of the opposite mentality of it. I've always looked at, you know, cannabis beverages as replacing beer. You don't drink one beer, you drink a 6-pack, or you drink, you know, if you're my dad, you drink several cases over the course of a day.
Is not drinking a Bud Light. Maybe a dinner or whatever. And I think that's where the whole market does flip it, is in ritual consumption environments, bars, restaurants, whatever. That 2-5 milligrams is probably the right per serving, so you don't overserve somebody.
That actually leads to my next question was, how do you educate people about a 100 milligram can, you know, and what responsibility do you feel as the manufacturer of that?
I mean, we make sure we train all of our things to be like, this is a 100 milligram product. This year we are launching a 20 milligram 16 ounce product, so you can drink the whole bottle, right?
Okay.
We you know, so you can have 20, even someone who's a newbie, they drink 100 milligrams. Yeah, they're going to have probably a bad day, right? Especially when it's fast acting and actually has higher bioavailability. It's going to hit way more than other 100 milligram edibles as well. And so we do have a lower dose one, but we do educate all of our customers when people talk to us. But, you know, it's with anything else. We don't want people to get green sick on the first thing. So we really do train people, be like, hey, this is kind of not for beginners. You know, this is not an entry level product, but that also does create a barrier, right? If your primary product is not approachable, you know, 100 milligrams is intimidating even to pretty hardcore users. There's a lot.
I'm a 5 milligram per gummy guy. So 100 milligrams in a can of what is the same size as my Rockstar Recovery. To me, I was sitting there like, ooh, 16 ounce can. And then I was like, oh, they put an extra 0 on that by accident. And then I was like, oh, that's not by accident. That is 100 milligrams.
And you know, and that is, we do make our product taste good. Like our orange vanilla is a top selling product, right? It's decadent. It has a mouthfeel like an orange vanilla creamsicle. I used to drink vanilla vodka and orange juice. It was my thing. That's why we made that product, right? From a flavor profile perspective, you know, it's real hard not to drink a whole bottle when you really just need to take a sip off the top, right? And that is one of the issues. So it goes to that. So that does lead to, what are the format differences, right? And that's important, because you got to pay attention to what people want. We've found no one low dose is really going into dispensaries, at least in Montana and New Mexico. People who are going into a dispensary are not dabblers. You know, they dabble with their friends thing, right? Usually it's a friend's like, hey, you should try a Sinful, just take a sip, right? And that creates that whole kind of relationship with the product that way. And it does create that mystique, underground, whatever. Most people are not exposed to our product through dispensaries. They're exposed to our product through their friends.
So and honestly, that's the best way to be exposed to most things, right?
Yeah, 100%.
We
Instant vouching.
We share our favorite music, we share our favorite movies, we share our favorite, oh, you go out somewhere and you have a bite of something, oh, you've got to try this, it's the best slice of pizza you've ever had. And then they're like, I don't even understand what cheese this is, and you're like, well, it's Emo's, it's not real cheese, but it's from St. Louis, so you have to like it.
Yeah. And that's and that's so much of the market was captive before, but now so many brands are multi-state that like just being the only one doing something isn't enough to succeed in any state anymore, right? You can't be the only one with fast acting or whatever. Someone else is going to come in. And so there is this arms race of like what either sets you apart and you get a niche, or what is more like universally appeal.
One of the things that, sorry, I didn't mean to step on you. But one of the things you said a couple paragraphs ago that honestly my joke about emos kind of brought back up for me is mouthfeel. That's not something you hear a lot of people talk about in beverages. You hear them talk a little bit more about it in gummies, but even then, really what they're saying a lot of times is just like the consistency. But you guys have taken an approach to mouthfeel kind of across the board with your products. For people that don't like Emo's Pizza, a lot of times it's because of the mouthfeel of Provel cheese, which is a blend, and it's not cheesy. It's melted plastic on top of pepperonis on a cracker, but it's unique.
Well, and our product, so like a lot of the fragrance and flavor industry and brands, they spend a lot of time working on inducing an emotional state when you consume something, or you put the perfume on you, or the cosmetic, or whatever. And so for us, we wanted our emotional state to kind of fit with the Sinful name and be like, this is decadent, right? We want your first sip, you're like, oh, this is creamy, and the flavors are there, and the sweetness hits, and all this kind of stuff. And be like, your first thought when you sit back is, man, that was decadent. It's like eating a truffle. It's like having a really good martini, eating a really good ganache, an amazing cannoli, right? We want that to hit all that. And there's so much science behind that the food industry and all these industries pay so much attention to, because you have receptors. Like we worked with a Japanese company, in the 2010s, and they were looking for the deliciousness molecule, right? They were the company that had discovered umami, and they discovered these other senses on your tongue. Well, they found out that there's a whole set of things that if you can trigger it, you just are like, this is delicious. Like if you ever had a bowl of miso soup, right, with the right thing, and you're just like, oh my God, why does this taste so good? They figured out how to get that deliciousness molecule out of there. And so getting that emotional state from doing it. So when you consume a functional ingredient, there's two things that has to happen. Number one, it has to work. So cannabis is probably, in my opinion, besides caffeine and some other stimulants, one of the easier things to work with on that part, because it's working, right? If your emulsion doesn't hit in 10, 15 minutes, right, for a drink, and it takes 2 hours, right? There's lots of stuff when you're designing a new soda or like another sports recovery drink or whatever. You don't have this immediate cue of this is working. And then once the functional ingredient works, it has to do set and setting, right? Psychedelics talks about it. Cannabis talks about it. Set and setting, right? So you need the whole flavor experience to be like, this is fucking awesome when the cannabinoids hit, right? Because now you've created that chain of thought, and you create that whole thing of like, this is awesome, I love this product. And that's the whole part of like intentionally being flavor forward and working on this, is you can make it to you're just like, this is as good as my favorite sushi, my favorite cheesecake, my favorite whatever. You can get those profiles in there to where you create that emotional state with the product, and you're just like, I fucking love this. And that's the part I love doing. And not necessarily even for me, because like what I love, someone else is not going to love. Most of the stuff that stoners love is way too sweet for me. And there's actually studies that say routine cannabis users, it actually changes how your brain perceives sweetness, and therefore you like sweeter things, and that's why you have a sweet tooth.
Whoa.
And so there's all this neurological science behind how it just even routine use over your life changes your perceptions on what you like. And so
I think you might be a witch. because
I mean,
I'm pretty sure you've invented Love Potion. But
you can do that emotional state with it though. You can be like, I fucking love this product, right? Or an energy drink can get you to have the niacin flush, and you're like, I'm fucking energized. Let's go. Like, it's all done with ingredients. It's all done with how the flavors and the smells and the physicality of your body, it all comes together at the same time. And cannabis naturally does it. And it naturally makes products taste better, right? CB1 receptor triggering just makes stuff taste better. So if it already tastes really good and doesn't taste like weed, the weed's gonna make it taste better.
I I hear everything you say, and I'm pretty well versed in cannabis, but at the same time, I sit there and I go, man, he's talking. He's saying all these things, and all I can think is my mouth is literally watering as he describes half of the stuff. Like I'm losing half of the science based on the way you're describing it. But the passion and the knowledge to know what you're looking for and what you're looking to create, the fact that you can make my mouth water from describing what you're trying to achieve with your product, I think that says a lot about the thought process that you guys have put into creating the experience from the top down.
And you know, that's why we always say flavor first, right? The flavor is your first experience with it, and beverages are super unforgiving. Your taste receptors get hit with all the bitter. So if you can make that first part good, the rest is actually easy compared to that. My favorite thing to do with flavor is if you have a favorite flavor type of candy, like you love blue raspberry Jolly Ranchers, go buy 5 or 6 different versions of that kind of style candy from different people, a lollipop, a whatever, and try the difference. And you can actually map out why you like one thing versus the other. You'll start realizing, oh, the sweetness was a little slower to come on from that. That's the type of sweeteners they use. Oh, this flavor actually tastes better than that. That's the different flavoring houses in the food industry putting their own special, unique ingredients into it, so you'll be hooked on them and have to use them forever for your product.
Interesting.
So there's just all this. I mean, there's so much science just in the flavor, and then there's a ton of science in the mouthfeel. Then there's a ton of science in the emulsion side, and then there's all this science that layers on it. But if you can understand all of it, you can just make these amazing products people love.
Clearly, people love what you guys are doing because you launched in 2022, and you've been the top-selling brand in Montana. Relatively quickly. You guys
pretty much from day 0, day 1, when we first could all start doing wholesale.
And how do you capture an entire audience so quickly, and what was the secret? What did others miss that you guys paid attention to or did differently?
I think it's probably 3 different things. So the top one is we really did a lot of just like what we call bud tender appreciation. And so we'd go in and I'd bring Red Bulls and chips to all the bud tenders in town. Wouldn't tell them who I was, wouldn't tell them what company I worked for. I'd just be like, nope, I'm just here for bud tender appreciation. They do that. And then I'd come back maybe next week and have something else. I'd bring, cookies their mom wouldn't let them have in their lunchbox, right? From Walmart. Just simple things, right? And then finally someone's like, hey, okay, who the fuck are you and what are you doing? I'm like, oh, I'm James. I have this company. We do this, but don't worry about it. It'll get around to you or whatever later. Not the hard sell, right? This is very much like introducing people to it, doing this whole thing, not being transactional. So lots of cannabis is very transactional, right? I do this, you do this for me. Okay, if I introduce you to my boss, what are you going to do for me kind of thing? We like flip the script and we're like, we're not going to be transactional. We're going to be like this. We learned that a lot of employers actually treat their frontline staff like crap. It's I don't understand because they're making the money. It's this interesting thing I see in almost every state. And so we really did this whole thing where it's like, how do we really get the people on there? And then a lot of times I'd just be like, oh, do you want to try one? I'll go buy it from you. And so that was one that got lots of people is like, oh, I'll go buy one for you. And then I'd have to go across the street to the other dispensary to buy it from. Like Missoula, the town I live in, has more dispensaries in it, not per capita, more dispensaries than any other town in America. I believe there's 57 dispensaries in a town of about 100,000 people.
Wow.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. So it's really easy to be like, let me go across the street and buy you one. Let's meet in the parking lot, right? So then it kind of still had that clandestine whatever feel. I'm an adult giving another adult a product. That's fine kind of thing. And like we really took that guerrilla approach to the whole thing. And then we started, we started hosting our own parties. So we like routinely do just a party where like we ask the bud tenders what their favorite top shelf drink is, and like a lot of the, girl bud tenders like Casa Azul because they never had it and they wanted to ring the bell. So we'd have a bunch of bottles of Casa Azul lined up and be like, um, come on in. We'd host these parties. We'd do whatever. And there was never any expectation, right? We invited people from dispensaries that don't carry us, managers. We didn't care. It was more about how do we build the culture, right? How do we have this different kind of culture on things? And then kind of the third thing with all that is, we do what we say we're going to do. Even if it's something horrible, we'll do it. Right. And so that creates that expectation of, okay, you're going to follow through with what you say you're going to do. Not everyone loves you for it. You make enemies if you actually hold to what you say you're going to do. There's stuff like that happens. But like, someone has a leaky bottle, we replace the whole case. Right.
Wow.
That stuff really isn't done in cannabis. There's this like almost like penny pinching, like maybe they'll replace the one bottle. We're like, no, we'll replace the whole case for you. It's fine. And everyone's like, oh, what if someone takes advantage of you? Well, eventually you'll just stop doing business with people who take advantage of you.
I love that. I love that approach. It sounds like, not to make it too much of buttering your bread, but it sounds like you guys did everything right from day one. Were there any mistakes or any like hard lessons learned along the way?
So the biggest mistake is we actually in 22, we thought people would want alcohol flavors. So we made a 16-ounce cinnamon whiskey flavored one that tastes like Fireball whiskey. No one wants that. Just so you know, no one wants that product at all. Number one, we were still under, hey, maybe people are only taking 10 milligrams at a time. So that's a 1 ounce shot. That equals that. No, what we learned is from our experience, we did Moscow Mule flavored, we did champagne stuff, we did all this alcohol flavored stuff, did a ton of R&D on it. No, stoners did not want that. They want watermelon, they want orange vanilla, they want strawberry, they want huckleberry, they want blue raz, they want, maybe they want a lemon or a pomegranate or whatever as well too. But it's more that fruity, sweet, almost like candy-like flavors. Something that tastes like a cosmopolitan. And like we actually even got like alcohol flavors to put in it. So it's not alcohol, but it would taste like whiskey or vodka or whatever. No one wanted that. That was just a huge flop, right?
That's crazy.
Yeah,
I mean, it makes sense, but it's...
I mean, like all the snowmobilers and skiers like chug Fireball. Well, guess what? People who are chugging Fireball want to get raging angry drunk. They don't want to chill out. So that was the misjudge, right? And then so I'm like, okay, lesson learned. I think the other one is, that was really hard for me to learn because it's not common in other industries is, holding people to expectations. And if they can't meet them, really pisses people off. Whether that's a partner, whether that's internal staff, whether that's whatever, it's something that I found this industry is more sensitive of than other industries where if like you have an expectation and you're like, hey, you didn't meet my expectation, you might as well just say, you just might as well have peed on their dog or something, right? And like, or kicked their puppy or whatever, told them their kid was ugly. It's this weird thing that I didn't ever experience in other industries, not in defense, not in pharma, not in food. It was like, oh, lesson learned, I'm sorry, or no, you had the wrong expectations. There's pushback. Cannabis just kind of ends up with people angry. And then you're like, oh, okay. So now I see where the blood feuds and the beefs and all that happen. And you're like, oh, I get it now. Like I didn't really understand the tribalism and a lot of the beefs in like, in Washington, Oregon, California, New Mexico has them, Montana has them. Like I was looking around, I'm like, I don't get this, and I thought maybe it was a legacy thing or whatever. I just think it's just something that's a little more unique or a little more openly prevalent in cannabis that really caught me off guard. Now I'm kind of more used to it. And I'm just like, fucking hate me. I don't correct any rumor about me. Nothing. I'm like, treat me like that's true. I literally am to the point in my life now where I'm like, if you heard some horrible rumor about me, treat me like it's true and you won't go wrong. Right?
That's a strange but wonderful approach to it, because instead of being concerned with the things that are at the end of the day, you can't change other people's opinions most of the time. And so it's a very, my therapist would commend you on your level of self-awareness and self-resilience to be comfortable knowing that some people are not going to like you, and that's absolutely fine.
Oh, I mean, and it's a hard lesson. Like I mean, the average person want to be like, but also if you're kind of on the science side and you're kind of blunt and you probably be classed as neurotypical and probably have ADHD and I have dyslexia, all those kind of things you talk about, that just doesn't rub everyone the right way, and you just learn you're not everyone's cup of tea. And then you build a team that can be like, okay, if they don't like me, maybe they'll like this other person, right? And then so you kind of have a team that you start figuring out who fits with what personalities and keep it that way.
My son is the member of my team that is the nice and he would be the person that handled all the PR and stuff like that, because he's very soft and heartfelt and empathetic and well spoken and things like that. And I grew up being told, like, hey, you get told something once, and if you don't remember it 366 days from today, then that's your fault. Write it down.
Yeah.
So
I always joke I'm a broadsword, not a scalpel. It's like my favorite line from an old Bruce Willis movie, right? It's like, I'm really good at, like, let's do massive changes. Let's do this. Let's move mountains. Detailed work, like holding someone's hand if something's not getting done. I am not the guy to, like, talk to about that. I'll just be like, but I'm also forgiving of mistakes, right? So for me, I'm like, oh, you're going to make mistakes. I made tons of mistakes. So mistakes don't bother me, but I work with people where, they're like, you were trained once or twice. Why can't you remember this? And it drives them nuts. And I'm like, yeah, it's, people have trouble remembering stuff. It's fine.
Well, you're pragmatic, right? Because at the end of the day, there's a difference between incompetence and maliciousness, right?
Yep.
And as long as you always are as long as a mistake is made because of incompetence and not because it's malicious, then there's really no reason to stay angry about it or hold a grudge against somebody. You just have to try and correct it and move on.
Oh yeah, and it's honestly, if you can, like, just absorb stuff and let it pass through you and kind of like, okay, I'll deal with this and go forward from there, your life gets way easier. It's that holding on to stuff that just doesn't really matter. And once I learned that most people actually really don't give a crap about you, like, they're not thinking about you all the time. Like, even if they hate your guts, like, if you're not right in their face, they probably have not had a single thought about you. Like, it's fine. Don't worry about it. This is all unnecessary worry.
We're getting ready to get deep into my therapist's pocket if we keep going down that road. But the one thing that she kind of told me whenever I first started therapy was, you don't have as many stalkers as you think you do. And I was like, well, what do you mean? Well, even the people who like you the least in the world are thinking about you way less than you're thinking about them thinking about you.
Yes, that's a great lesson to get.
One of the things, so that I can talk to her about this on Friday. One of the things, we'll get back to our regularly scheduled conversation, is we talked about your kind of, I guess you'd phrase it as like guerrilla marketing, going in and meeting people at the ground level and infiltrating the dispensary for Bud Tender Appreciation Day, even before you're trying to pitch your product or anything like that, in an environment that cannabis has, from market to market, wildly different advertising restrictions on how you can advertise to consumers, how you can advertise to other companies, how you can advertise to brand partners or anything. What is the biggest challenge that you see in going from market to market and trying to replicate that same experience of what you've had?
So, like, a great example is, like, Montana. It's pretty open. People are laid back. They'll talk. It's normalized in general. I go to Arizona and there's guys with machine guns at the door. Right? Like, at least the two dispensaries I went to in Phoenix, I was like, what is going on? And like, so a lot of them, like, it's double locked doors. It's kind of this, it's not a laid back kind of experience. And so a ground game gets very difficult in that kind of situation because you don't necessarily have access to the frontline people, right? And so even if you have the patience to wear them down, lack of a better term, 6 months before you even introduce them to your product, where they actually already know you as a person, that's incredibly difficult to go in these environments that are ultra high volume stores, right? Captured MSO markets where that, and so that's where you actually do have to, if you still want to be guerrilla, you do have to pivot your ground game to trade shows, MJ BizCon, MJ Unpacked. I guess it's called Ignite It now, not Benzinga, right? You actually have to start doing those other things. The tactic still works though, right? If you actually can be a person that someone wants to interact with and you're not trying to push your agenda on people, and generally, this is going to sound really weird, but we're like, carry us or don't, it's great, whatever. We found that the customers that have found our product, if a dispensary stops carrying our product, they just go to a different dispensary to buy our product. We kind of have that. There's that inelastic demand, and there's a handful of products that you see. Smokies is like that, right? So we have a partnership with Smokies in Montana where we help distribute their stuff through our kind of distribution networks and our partners, right? And it's pretty inelastic. If people want a Smokies and you're not carrying a Smokies, they're going to leave your dispensary and go find a store that has a Smokies if you stop carrying it. And so there are these brands, Wild in other states kind of has that following. You see this with these major brands. They figured it out. Stizzy actually has it. Even when I was in New York before it was really legal and a ton of the bodegas had all these California product there, people were looking for the Stizzies. They're looking for the cookies. They're looking for this stuff that they have this brand affiliation with, and they'll go to somewhere else if they don't have it. And so that's when someone's done really good at branding. Is if you're sitting in a store, I've done bud tending shifts. I've done all sorts of stuff with people let me do it to learn. And you see someone come in and be like, oh, we don't have that, and they leave. I immediately want to go learn about that brand.
Yeah.
Right? I want to learn why is this inelastic? Why are they forsaking convenience, which is what most people say cannabis is about, convenience, to then go somewhere else and get that product. And those are the brands that have the best lessons for operators, especially if we start truly talking about federal legalization, where now you're anywhere north of Oklahoma, right? They're going to be able to do multiple outdoor crops in the southern states, in California, whatever. We're not going to ever be able to compete on manufacturing then, in cost per gram. And so what do we need to learn about these inelastic brands and how that works to actually build better brands, build better things, build better consumer experiences?
Well, you've mentioned a couple of my favorite companies, and one of the companies that we see that kind of has that inelasticity in the Missouri market, and simply I think personally is because they were one of the first ones to come out with a large single dose high dose gummy. It's Gruen with their Mega Pearl 100 milligram single dose gummy. That was inelastic for a lot of people. They don't want an entire bag of gummies. They want that one gummy to be able to take and be done with, instead of sitting there for 20 minutes eating a bag of candy, essentially.
Yeah. And those are that's a format that I've seen it be both popular and fall out of popularity in different dispensaries. There was a time where the single dose, 100 milligram gummy thing, flew off the shelf, couldn't keep them. And then that kind of faded in popularity and people switched. And even those shifts in popularity, I'm always intrigued by. What is that? Fatigue? Is it flavor fatigue? Is it just they don't do gummies anymore? They switch to something
jaw
else?
Fatigue.
Yeah, jaw.
It's TMJ.
Me. Yeah, my jaw hasn't popped this whole interview, and I'm actually so I get it. And so that's also stuff that I love, like Gruen being purchased by Wild recently, right?
Yeah.
But it is Gruen. That was a smart, excellent move, I think, in that opinion. And that is positioning. They observed it. They obviously had a good relationship beforehand. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't have had an acquisition the way they did. But studying those brands that are just killing it, because a lot of times it's not just on price, right? A lot of times it's the intrigue of the packaging. It's the
Wild's packaging is a great example of that, because it looks just so much different than everybody else's packaging at a dispensary.
Yeah, and so, it has shelf appeal. It has appeal just in your home. It's visually interesting. We talk about a lot of stuff, needs to be almost artistic or visually interesting to gather
Mhm.
things. Most people shop for wine based on the label, right? So when you start learning those demographics from other markets, it starts making sense in cannabis, right? A lot of times, you're carrying, if you use vape pens, you're carrying a vape pen around, right? You like the feel, those satin finishes, the feel of like a Dime or some of the other manufacturers out there. They just feel better. They might not even be better. I don't really know. It's not my segment, but you can observe the consumer behavior, and that's what I just find so fascinating, because it's no different than mouthfeel. We talked about beverages. That hit, that draw, a Puffco that looks like an old man's pipe. Every fucking kid from 25 to 35 that's into dark academia and this market segment and stuff wants a Puffco that looks like an old man's pipe, right? Have no idea why, but it is what it is, and they
I,
like it. And so those are those consumer things that's like, you're delighting your customer, right? Whether it's mouthfeel, whether it's flavor, whether it's how the device feels in your hand, whether it's the squishiness of the bud and the structure of it, and it's not larfy, and all these terms you learn in the whole space, it lets you understand there's so many different ways to delight the customer, and that creates that inelasticity.
I 100% understand and agree with that. I'm a big. I used to be a big vape guy. I've gradually cut back more and more on vaping and switched mostly to edibles at this point. But I was almost exclusively timeless on vapes for a long time. And I went into a dispensary one time that didn't carry timeless and almost walked out, and happened to see a little vape by a company called Pax,
Oh yeah.
which at the time was Pack Woods. But it was silicone and rubber on the outside of on the outside of their all-in-one. And I'm such like a texture and like fidgeting guy. I've been sitting here flipping my pen around and stuff the whole time. Just holding that all-in-one vape made me a person that, if you don't have timeless, I'll buy this more often than I won't.
I went through this whole belief about cannabis for a while. So at first I was like, it's all medicinal. And then I was like, maybe it's not all medicinal. And then I was talking to Dustin from Fat Nugs magazine, right? And he's really pushes all cannabis use as medicinal use. And so if you think about it, a huge amount of people who are routinely using cannabis are self-medicating their anxiety from ADHD or neurodivergence or whatever, or they have pain or they have sleep issues or whatever. And so it actually makes sense that a lot of those behaviors, fidget spinners for ADHD, like a lot of this kind of stuff, those texture things, that goes to neurodivergent people. There's a lot of these cross associations. It's kind of this dirty thing we're not supposed to talk about, right? Like, you're not supposed to be like, hey, design stuff so people with ADHD will like to fidget with your thing or whatever.
Right? Yeah.
You're not supposed to. I'm the guy who will say it and then get people pissed off at me. But what it comes down to is people are utilizing all of this stuff to make their lives better, right? Whether that's to alleviate anxiety or their ADHD symptoms because they don't want to be on amphetamines, or they actually used other, compounds and they're trying to do it, or they were, used alcohol before and they don't want to use alcohol, but they still need that support to get through life or whatever and make their experience of life better. That's what a lot of this product is. And I wouldn't classify it as wellness per se. And there's people that argue with me and say it is a wellness product, but I would argue that the cannabis in general is about making your life better in some way. You're drawn to it, you use it because you're utilizing it to make your life better. And like, we can do so much in designing these products to make people's lives better in other ways and increase that experience and do it. Like, I love when a vape pen has a certain texture and a certain feel and is comforting, right? My guess is some of these brands spent a lot of money figuring that out.
Oh yeah.
Of like, why do people like this? And that's where this whole data driven thing, and like, dude, even in the last 2 years of being able to do data analysis with AI on, people's how they enter a dispo and looking at the video analysis or looking at the actual POS data and the sales data and all this stuff. There's so much now and it's accelerating so fast. We're going to be able to do so much more in the future to just make products that people love.
One of the things that we kind of glazed on with talking about marketing and going down the rabbit hole of different packaging and product formats and stuff is compliance. Missouri is a state that has much more restrictive packaging rules than most other states. We actually got more restrictive going into adult use than we were in medical. They made it so that packaging has to be more uniform and can have less things and bells and whistles and stuff like that. One of the things that I've heard you say before is operators often confuse compliance with excellence. And what do you mean by that? And what does excellence actually require beyond just compliance?
So like compliance is like the bare minimum to do stuff and stay operational, right? When so like packaging is a great example, right? Okay, even if you have all these rules, you can still design your product around making it so someone is like, this is fucking cool, right? So yeah, you can't have a cartoon character on it, or you can't use bright colors, or maybe it needs to be black and white. There's all these rules. There's also ways to utilize all of that to actually still make that product just be amazing, right? From that whole thing. And that's that step up that when you start competing on a national stage, people with big money, people with high flow, non-captive markets, you're going to have an excellent product, right? You can argue whether you like it or not. Pepsi seems to be able, and Coke, when you look at them, there's just something about Coke's branding and their things and their whatever that just makes it pop a little bit more than Pepsi when you look at it, right? Even if you like stuff differently. And that's what I would say. And I think they're both, from a branding perspective and how they run it, they're both excellent. And they're excellent compared to Mr. Pibb, right? Or whatever, those baselines one, or, those baseline kind of things. You look at it, there's just, and I mean, they have billions of dollars more. So there's obviously more marketing going into it, more research. But that level of excellence is just paying attention to every little bit of the detail. And then that flows backwards from, white glove service and distribution and manufacturing and supporting your manufacturers and supporting your partners and doing all those different kind of things. It kind of creates this whole wave of things that like then lead to an excellent product. And I think there's a lot of people that are like, well, I'm compliant, that's enough. Buy my pre-roll, right? And like, okay, but now, is the paper done a certain way? Is it sustainable? Like a lot of it doesn't sell it complete sustainability, whatever. A lot of consumers don't care, but it does create an excellent package, right? And it creates that whole excellence of you're thinking about your impact on the environment and your whatever in your whole life cycle. And that makes your brand or your company more valuable in general, right? Whether you want to have an exit and sell to someone or get out or find investors or whatever, the more you can just drive excellence everywhere just makes it easier to do those things that you want to do.
One of the things that that we talk a lot about is ethos of companies and having an identity beyond just whatever your logo happens to be, or beyond just whatever your product format happens to be, and talking about your attitude towards excellence. That's the ethos of a company, right? Is going beyond bare minimums. We're not going to rest on our laurels. We're not going to stop at good enough. We're going to keep pushing, and we're going to keep finding ways to be better. When you talk about sustainability and things like that, those are not always the most profitable decisions, but those are decisions that make up the ethos of a company. If you're willing to sacrifice, a few cents to a few dollars per unit to be able to say, we're lowering our carbon footprint by X%, that goes to the root of what the company values are, or what the brand values are, beyond just, the X's and O's and the bottom dollar on it, right?
And sometimes you have to sacrifice certain things for other fits, right? So a great example is we use plastic bottles, right? Everyone's like, plastic, you could argue all sorts of things, right? However, a lot of the culture in Montana in the summer is floating rivers, and you don't want glass in the rivers. So we intentionally went plastic so people could have it camping, floating the rivers, whatever from there, and not contaminate the environment with broken glass that injures people and stuff like that, even though glass would have been more a sustainable choice.
But that goes to your thought process and the ethos, right? Because you're creating not just the product, but you're creating for the community and the consumer that you're serving, right?
And really understanding that consumer. And I think that's the people who really study their consumer. Those are the ones that are just they win in CPG, they win in cosmetics and fragrance, they win in food, they win in experiences, right? Look at old Disney where everything was great and perfect, right? Like, maybe not so much anymore, but like the old days, it was a fucking magical experience. And that's why they grew as big as they did. Same thing with all of these different brands. And you're going to see it. The people that are just consumer obsessed and understand their consumer markets are going to dominate in the future.
You guys have obviously done a great job of dominating your consumer market in Montana. You've launched in New Mexico. What makes a state appealing to you as far as where you want to go, or finding a brand partner in a particular state? Is it the size of the market? Is it the a particular partner that you're looking for? How do you guys evaluate that and move forward?
I think it's really cultural compatibility at this point, right? Like, at first we looked pretty heavy at the East Coast, 22, 23. There's just a lot of players, and there was a lot of chaos, and there was a lot of craziness, and there's a lot of just those issues. And so for us, I think it's not so much the market, right? Because like New Mexico doesn't necessarily make sense. It's hyper saturated, it's whatever, but we could find people we could work with down there that fit our cultural thing, right? And so with that culture of like focusing on excellence, making sure your customers are taken care of, all of those kind of things we do in Montana, that's as important to us in expansion as a market. We'd go into a smaller market, or maybe even a medical only market.
Whether you guys are producing beverages and gummies, how do you evaluate whether the product actually delivers the experience that it's promising? And I have a follow-up to that based on the product types that you guys are creating.
We really are big into effectively fieldability trials, right? So like if it's a new formulation, it's a new whatever, stuff that's tried and true and established, right? If you get the manufacturing lined up, it's pretty consistent. Consistency is what we kind of learned how to do. But when we're doing new things or there's a formulation change or whatever, there are trials. We'll get 10, 20, 30, 50 people to be like, here's blind triangulated tests on this stuff. We do it like the food industry does. We do these actual trials. Is the consistency good? Is the flavor good? Is the effect good? We collect all the data. We look at it. We make sure that's all going well before we even actually roll that stuff out to market again.
With the changes that we've seen at the end of last year and the impending into intoxicating hemp potentially coming in about 330 days at this point, where do you see the hemp markets closure or sundowning as potential growth, and is that something that you guys are evaluating as far as saturation of intoxicating hemp in markets right now and going in to replace things that aren't going to be on convenience store shelves anymore?
So I think that's going to be a weird one just in general. So for one, it does deny people, the closing of the loophole does deny people access in a lot of states, right? Texas, all this kind of stuff. We have a lot of the South. For some reason, hemp was allowed, but cannabis, they never did medical programs. Who knows? Like whatever, politics aside from there. One of the things that people never really stood about the hemp industry is it could always be shut down at a moment's notice, right? So the Drug Preclusion Act effectively prevents you from putting a known drug into food and supplements, right? And so, except for flour and vapes, technically all the hemp edibles, hemp beverages, all that are categorically black letter illegal, right? The state regulated programs, technically THC is an adulterant, right? From the FDA's viewpoint, Schedule 1 substance, can't put it in things, an active drug. State legal programs it created this weird loophole, but anyone selling across state lines with hemp was always potentially exposed and has been exposed to that threat pretty much no matter what. And so while there's a lot of this, it's being shut down, there's these caps, it's going to destroy the industry. They could have destroyed the industry anytime they wanted by just enforcing existing laws. So no different than Schedule 1 and state level cannabis programs. The federal government could have always potentially just said, no, you guys can't do that. The exemptions in the federal rules only ever really appeared to protect medical programs. So like as states became recreational, the DOJ could have always, it appears, to use that funds to actually shut down those programs. And so I think there's a lot of like, oh my God, the sky's falling, but it always could have fell at the drop of the hat. And so while I think it will drive some demand, most of the demand for hemp products never appeared to be in really, especially adult use cannabis legal states. Exception being the beverage industry in Minnesota, right? There was all that stuff in Minnesota. That's just going to be a crazy quagmire, whatever's going on over there that's different with that. But the rest of the things, it's going to be denying people access to cannabinoids in Texas, Missouri, Mississippi, Alabama, like the Florida, those areas where there really isn't strong medical programs, or they're really rigorous to actually get a medical card and all that stuff. And so I don't think you'll see it drive as much business back to dispensaries as people think.
I have a different opinion on that. Coming from Missouri and walking into, Total Wine and Macadoodles and seeing entire aisles that are dedicated to nothing but THC beverages. And I can think of no less than 25 hemp beverage companies we have here in Missouri. And I think that if you can't go into your convenience store, in November of this year and pick up the product that you've been buying for the last 2 or 3 years on a regular basis, there's not a whole lot of guys in the traditional market or the gray market that are making homebrew seltzers and beverages and sodas and things like that are THC infused. So I do think it's going to have some impact. Perhaps I'm overestimating it because Missouri's market is richer than other markets, and I wasn't quite as in tune with that. But I think specifically here we'll see a bigger driver, because right now we really only have a few brands of beverages. We have Keef, we have Franklin's, we have Guys. I know I'm forgetting a couple, but then we have a bunch of the small shots and the additives and things like that. But Missouri really only has like 5 or 6. Wink was really successful here in Missouri, and they actually stopped producing in the marijuana market in Missouri because they were so successful on the hemp side. Yep. And so I think whenever we look at things like that, I think there is going to be a driver that comes back, because it was obviously a large enough segment, at least in this state, that I think we'll see some impact on the dispensaries that kind of embrace it and maybe put up a bev wall or something like that they don't currently have now.
Yeah, and so honestly, beverages are hard to manufacture and transport, right? So if you don't have scale to do it, it gets really hard. So like a lot of the hemp companies got successful because they could use a co-packer somewhere and mass produce, and they were maybe making beverages, hemp beverages for 10, 15 different brands, right? Just producing them and selling out there. And so you could get that economy of scale and those benefits and stuff. When you start going back to state by state to actually manufacture stuff, carbonation is not necessarily easy, right? You have to chill stuff down and get the CO2 in it. And then there's a bunch of stuff that goes with that, canning lines, buying cans, all that stuff. It gets difficult. And so I think states with strong, healthy markets, I think Missouri is one where you could have 2 or 3 brands pop up, stay in the regulated space, do just fine, drop something. But, the smaller markets, it gets really hard, right? Trying to do that in the New Mexico or even a Montana market, right? Where, it's only 300 million a year in sales. And like lots of states, like Montana, I think it's the 3.5% beverage sales of the total cannabis market, pretty big, right? Most states are less than 1% when it comes to dispensaries. When you actually look at cannabis beverages or cannabis drink sales, it doesn't, sans removing the hemp and the corner stores and whatever, just from a dispensary angle, it's not big. And so then you start looking at, is it worth chasing $2 or $3 million worth of revenue a year when you're, already, a major vape player that's making $10, $15 million a year revenue on their vape wholesale line? You want to pick up nickels, and that becomes a big issue.
Yeah, that's always my problem. Sometimes I don't even go by the bank because they're like, "Oh, you accidentally left $1 million in this envelope," and I'm like, I'm not
I
going to
mean,
waste the gas to go back. No, I understand it.
yeah.
I really do. I understand exactly what you're saying. And again, economies of scale, because there's how much does it cost you investment wise to start producing that $1 to $2 million?
And complexity, right? Like getting distillate and adding some terps to it and sticking it in a cart is way less complex than like getting your distillate, making an emulsion, getting the right water, blending the tank, getting the testing blend uniformity, filling a bunch of bottles, then labeling them, packaging them, and then transporting heavy stuff, right? You can fit probably a $500,000 of the carts in a standard SUV. You can fit what, $20,000 of the drinks if you're lucky.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you start looking at like even that, you're like, the effort to do this and move it. Montana is huge, right? We move about 3 tons, give or take, worth of beverages a week across Montana. We're a massive state. It's hard, right? Like those
It's
things.
just like 5 of those big shots bottles that you have, right?
It feels like it sometimes. Yeah. Each box is like 30 pounds, right? So,
wow.
And so when you look at it, like some of this is really hard, and that complexity is its own barrier to entry, right? It's like, I always joke, everyone's like, oh, why will you teach everyone how to make emulsions and flavor stuff or whatever and talk about it openly? I'm like, because it's hard. Like just wanting to do it is difficult. Like that stops 99% of people right there. It's hard to do.
Yeah.
Rolling a joint's easy. Even an infused joint's easy compared to trying to formulate a full beverage that's shelf stable for a year. Right?
I love that. And I love that you guys are looking at new markets and looking at expanding. Where do you see the flaws in what the industry is still getting wrong about consumer behavior? Because we've talked a lot about data. We've talked a lot about, the industry opinion and that, OG approach. Is there anything else that you've seen or maybe encountered as you've moved into New Mexico that the industry seems to still be lagging behind the reality?
People in the industry think everyone's a consumer and wants cannabis, right? There's this belief that like everyone's a potential cannabis consumer. And I see it everywhere I go. I even saw MJ BizCon from conversations at different events and stuff at the thing. And I'm like, not everyone's a consumer. And this is where all the major successful brand companies in the world get it. They understand that not everyone's their target. They're not trying to sell to everybody. Cannabis spends a lot of energy. We got to get new people in. We got to get, if they just try my joint or just try my vape or whatever, they'll be into it. They'll want it. It's just not the case. And so when we're looking at recruitment into the industry, and that probably sounds terrible as I say it out loud, but when you're looking at, it's a consumer good, right? Like people, we need new people as people age out, change their lifestyle, whatever. From there,
Consumer acquisition.
you need consumer acquisition. And how do you get new people to try just cannabis as the category, right? My kids, I have an 18 and a 17-year-old. They think cannabis is super dumb. They're like, why would anybody want to even try it? But they think alcohol's dumb, right? That's a Gen Z thing. They're not consuming mind-altering substances at the same rate other generations did, millennials, Xers, whatever. And so not only is that hurting the alcohol industry, and you see massive drops in alcohol industry sales, right? It's our industry is so early, we don't see the drops. I think if we were a 50-year established industry, we'd see Gen Z not consuming cannabis either at the levels millennials and Xers and even boomers consume it at.
Well, we got to give them like 5 to 10 more years so that they can start processing their trauma, right?
I mean, that's escapism is a major thing of, I think, tobacco, alcohol, and cannabis when we look at it, right? When you're looking at it there, and who knows what else comes along. I'm always a big thing of like, I love new stuff. So I'm always like, what's the black swan, right? Does all of a sudden psilocybin approved, right?
Psychedelics.
Like all of a sudden, do psychedelics take it over? There's lots of people looking at, ketamine and other compound derivatives that act like alcohol but don't give you a hangover. If all of a sudden, I think of Star Trek and crazy sci-fi things, right, where they drink synthol and you got drunk and then you could like press a button and you weren't drunk anymore, right, kind of thing. Like are other compounds going to come? Like there's people exploring other, plant compounds all the time that decrease anxiety, whatever, like there's all this stuff. Like, is something else going to come along that just disrupts our whole thought pattern on this? Right.
It's kind of like I'm about to sound like either the world's most informed or least informed person, and perhaps both simultaneously. I I see a big difference whenever I consume THCV over when I consume products that don't have THCV. And I know THCV is generally looked at as non psychoactive. Um, for me, it still it seems to enhance the other aspects of it, but in the same way that we used to think of like 1-to-1 CBD and THC as balancing it out and controlling the high a little bit. It seems like THCV for me is more of an overall like pleasant and calming experience rather than just getting high.
So THCV is it's the reason I actually kind of stayed around cannabinoids. So in 2019, sold the company. I was like, all right, I'm really interested in THCV. And it's because it has this bizarre functionality. It has a dose dependent action on the CB1 receptor, where below a certain dose, it's an antagonist and doesn't do it. And then above a certain dose, it's an agonist and triggers the receptor and causes intoxication. About 50 milligrams is what we found for the average person. You take 50 milligrams or more, you're going to be lit, right? What's even crazier is if you mix it with THC, it makes THC pop on and off the receptors. It does all this crazy stuff with it. So I've been absolutely fascinated with some of these other minor cannabinoids, and THCV is one of those I did a ton of work on. Unfortunately, almost all the material on the market synthetic, and Montana doesn't allow us to work with synthetic cannabinoids. Right, from that perspective. And so it's either made through chemistry, maybe fermentation, whatever. But for some reason, THCV is on our list. I've been trying to work on getting the proper cultivars with THCV in it here over the years, all that kind of stuff. The prototypes we've done with it historically, we loved working with it. We did vape work with THCV. We found veterans absolutely loved the effect of THCV on them versus THC. When they had a choice, they would always choose the THCV versus THC. Which I found absolutely fascinating. I'd like to dive into that way more. If I had unlimited money, there's so many clinical studies I'd want to do and actually figure this out and do it. It's just, at the end of the day, no one has unlimited money. So,
well, Missouri has a company called Ostara that and Cubano is part of that. Branching off of the chain of different brands and stuff. Their frozen Coke is a THCV high cultivar,
nice.
and it's wonderful. And then we've mentioned Wild several times. Wild has a THCV gummy that's kiwi flavor, and it's one of the only things that actually kind of resembles fresh fruit that I've ever tasted. So I feel like the next thing I need to do is just drive to Montana tonight so that I can come back and wrap this up, with like a 10-minute segment that's like, okay, I tried everything they have. Here's how wonderful all of it is, because I've talked multiple times about other people's companies during our interview, and I apologize for that.
No, that's all right. I like it. So for me, there's a lot of people doing things right, and I think a lot of the operators who have the willingness to improve and learn need to study all these different companies. Like, we don't do everything right. Wild doesn't do everything right. Not everyone does everything right, but a lot of these guys are doing enough right to really be able to thrive in these next things. And the more the industry can actually do this, I like competition, right? For me, I like legitimate competition that's making a good product. Let me rephrase that. Someone who's just breaking windows or whatever. I don't care about that, but which happens, right? But like, from there, I want that drive of competition and like making us all better because other industries do it, right? You know, the old joke about frenemies or whatever, like working in the food industry, yeah, there's competition, but then we also all go to dinner and talk about what we're working on and do things. And like, have you looked at this technology? Have you talked to this company? There's this kind of cross pollination, even among massive corporations you think might be blood enemies. And those guys they're no one's enemies, like in that thing, you know? And so like being able to drive this innovation and people learn on this, it is this constant arms race, but we can all get better and learn from each other. And like the more people want to learn all this stuff, the cooler I think it is because they can just make amazing products for people. Even if the product's not for me, I love seeing amazing products get out there and just new ways of doing things, new ways to deploy the technology, new things we learn about cannabinoids. You know, it's even though I'm not allowed to use, you know, the synthetic or semi-synthetic cannabinoids in Montana, I keep, you know, contact with like the guys at Bay Medica who do a bunch of the stuff on CBC and THCV, right? And like what's going on with that and all those things and like these minor cannabinoid blends. I think there's just this opportunity to be able to do so much. And because it has been underground for so long and not legal, there's just this ground floor opportunity for young or even older driven people who want to try and learn new things to still get in. And I still think there's time, right? I don't think impending Schedule 3 all of a sudden is like, it's pharma only and everything's closed off and whatever. Like, look, if they try to do that, it just all goes back black market then again anyways.
I think that's a great place to hit you with my last question. As we celebrate the innovation and progression of the industry of as a whole, and you know what the best actors are doing and the best companies are creating, what does success look like for Sinful as you grow and head into your next phase? We're at the beginning of 2026. What does success in this year and beyond look like for you?
I pretty much have one major goal. And by the end of this year, I want to have deals done to bring our brand into about 5 new states, right? I'm at this point where, you know, we looked at expansion, we did stuff, we consolidated some things, we figured some things out, like, you know, to make it so we'd be much smoother in any kind of expansion. This is the year I'm really looking for a lot of partners and expansion opportunity in a variety of markets, you know, have existing conversations going on. You know, you got to kiss a lot of frogs, I've learned in the space to find the prince, as they say, kind of thing. But that's really what we're looking at is like, okay, how do we get our brand, our way of doing things, our kind of stuff there? And who do we work with and how do we do those relationships, right? And like, for us, you know, we're very flexible. It's not like I'm like, I'm not going to work with so and so or whatever. I just need to work with people who do. They're going to do what they say they're going to do. We do what we say we're going to do, even if it's horrible. Is the running joke? If you say something horrible, you got to do it. Sorry, man. So don't say anything horrible. But we want to work with people that are doing the same thing. Like they're like, yes, we do this. We want to do it. You know, there's lots of money to be made with people striving for excellence. Don't have to be the cheapest, don't have to be whatever. It's just people gravitate towards that. If you can do cost effective and excellent, that's where you really dump.